Welcome back to Ride JBI. I'm JB. Today we finished up a JBI Spec suspension revalve on this 2023 Kawasaki KX450X model. That is Kawasaki's off-road / cross-country model for their 450 motocross bike. I'm a big fan of the Kawasaki KX450, especially the motocross bike. So given that this is their off-road version and they're starting off with their moto bike, this is a really high-performing bike. What we did here to the right of us is we did our suspension revalve on the forks and shock. We also did some firmer fork springs and shock springs as well for this individual. This individual is over 6 foot and over 200 pounds, so the stock spring rates are a little bit on the soft side. So we got the proper springs for their size, so that way we can establish proper rider sag. What I mean by that is that way when the rider gets on the bike is going to ride at its proper ride height. To go along with the spring rates, we did our JBI Spec Pro Fork Revalve. What that is us revalving the internals of the fork with additional hardware upgrades. Some of those is going to be replacing the stock subvalve inside of the forks. We have our own JBI suspension subvalve. We also update the mid-valve with our JBI leaf spring style mid-valve. We have some cool volume spacers we put in. As I talk about this stuff, if you're curious about what it looks like, how exactly it works, what it does, and what you should expect as a rider, please check out ridejbi.com. We have complete product pages, not only on this JBI suspension fork fork revalve that we did, but we also have a complimentary fork DIY kit, meaning if you don't want to send in your forks to us, we can send you the same do-it-yourself revalve kit that we did to these forks. To simply put it, some of the hard parts we do are to make these forks have a much plusher and smoother feel. Then some of the other hard parts we do are to ensure the fork always had a certain amount of hold up and anti-dive resistance. So that way the forks aren't overly soft and too divey. Our volume spacers do a really good job of giving the forks a very progressive feel as the forks compress through the travel. That ensures that you have good bottoming resistance during any high-speed impacts that you may find while out on the trail. Scenarios like this will be G-outs, crevices that you might find in the land, and high-speed whoops, or any flat landings, such as jumping off ledges. For the rear shock, we did our matching JBI Suspension Pro Shock Revalve as well. With that, we also include a few hardware pieces also. One of those is our JBI Suspension Black Bumper. It is made from the same PUR foam material as the stock bumper, but it has the additive of MBR rubber. This gives it that black color, and it also ensures that the bumper stays cushiony in its feel. It doesn't get hard over time, and it also gives it better UV protection, so it doesn't turn yellow, change color, and get brittle or hard. Also, you can see our JBI nitrogen cap on the bottom. That replaced the stock nitrogen cap we have here. Main reason for that is these are much more reliable than the stock caps that rely on a rubber plug for encapsulating and holding the gas pressure inside of here. Some of my favorite hard parts are the JBI titanium compression piston that locates behind our compression adjuster assembly. We have some really well-made and designed compression pistons that are very similar to the A-kit piston you'd find inside of the Showa kit shocks. We have those inside there along with our own JBI suspension revalving, and we also revalved the main piston shim stacks as well. So I would consider this a very comprehensive revalve of the rear shock, meaning again, we revalved both the main piston and the compression adjuster assembly that has shims in it as well. This was built to what we call our flowy single track spec. Think of that as riding off-road, but when you're riding, you have good momentum, meaning you're calmly in second and third gear speeds, probably in the middle of the high parts of the RPM, but it also does take into account some of the slower, more technical parts of the trail where you may downshift to first gear, and also some of the faster parts of the trail where you may be shifting up into fourth, maybe even fifth, such as those fire roads that you often find that connect some of the single track trails. So think of this as our very well-rounded off-road setup. It can also be tuned really well with our JBI suspension settings guide. What that is a piece of paper that tells you exactly how we set up your suspension in terms of the clicker settings, the spring rates, the oil volumes. And with that piece of paper, we're also giving you 4 alternative settings. 2 settings which are stiffer, 2 settings which are softer. So when referencing that guide, you're gonna have a very tunable range for how stiff or how soft you can make this suspension. All of the items and services that we discussed in this video, you can find links below the video in the video description, and this will take you to our ridejbi.com website, where you can find complete details, product images, and videos that detail everything about what we do, why we do it, and most importantly, what you should expect as a rider when you get your suspension back from Ride JBI. All JBI suspension services and parts can be found at ridejbi.com.